goodness, good morning. I didn't even have to say anything. You guys just, good morning. Happy MLK Day. You can say that back, it's okay. On behalf of our universities, our university family, welcome to our MLK celebration breakfast. We'll go lunch, we'll have a march this afternoon. It's a day about celebration, it's a day about appreciation. And I personally am excited because this is my first MLK celebration here at Ferris State. And that's an exciting time for myself just in all the various MLK celebrations we've been a part of. This is special because it's a first for me. And so welcome to everyone. Welcome to those who are tuning in, if you will, virtually this morning. Also, this time we're spending together is being recorded, so giving folks an opportunity later on to see it at their own leisure. But also we want to just say thank you to those of you who not only are online and virtual, but those of you who are in person. Welcome, glad you're here. Special welcome to our Ferris State University choir that's here this morning. They'll be sharing some tunes with us this morning and sharing time with us, and so we're excited about that. And then we have later on in the ceremony a couple of awards and recognitions we want to give away, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. I want to start out with, as we have readings today and various things that we'll be doing, I want to start out with a reading myself from Dr. King. And this particular reading is one that over the last 10, 15 years, I believe, of my career has been one that it seems like on MLK Day, for some reason, of all the amazing and intriguing things that Dr. King said during his lifespan here on earth, it seems like I always come back to this one for some reason. I want to share this with you this morning as we jump into our celebration of Dr. King. Here's what Dr. King said. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be? Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? And then he goes on to talk about the dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill. In that dramatic scene, 3 men were crucified. We must never forget that all 3 were crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. 2 were extremists for immorality and thus fell below their environment. The other, Jesus, was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness, and thereby rose above his environment. Perhaps the South, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. And this morning, friends, as we think about these words, my encouragement to you is actually to think really strong about that. What are we extremists for? What does that look like individually? Because that's what Dr. King was really stressing here. And not only as a nation, as a world, individually. What kind of extremist are you? Is it an extremist for love, for truth, for justice? For things that will advance our communities, for things that will advance our university? What kind of extremist are you? And to our students, what kind of extremist are you now, and what kind of extremist will you be? That is a compelling thought that I hope resonates in our minds on a daily basis. Because one thing about extremism, people notice extremism, don't they? Wherever it sits, it's noticed. I will tell you, extremism for what is right and truth, and extremism, as Dr. King said, for love. They notice that as well. Welcome to our time this morning. We will start by hearing and singing together, Little Voices Sing, with our choir, please.
Let our morning, everyone. So today I'll be reading a piece called The Fight for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, written by Erin Blakemore. On Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the nation pauses in remembrance of a civil rights hero. At least that's the point of the federal holiday that takes place on the third Monday of each January. MLK Day was designed to honour the activist and minister assassinated in 1968, whose accomplishments have continued to inspire generations of Americans. But though the holiday now graces the United States federal calendar and affects countless offices, schools, businesses, and other public and private spaces, it wasn't always observed. The fight for a holiday in Martin Luther King Jr.'s honour was an epic struggle in and of itself, and it continues to face resistance in the form of competing holidays to leaders of the Confederacy. King was the first modern private citizen to be honoured with a federal holiday. For many familiar with his non-violent civil rights movement leadership, it made sense to celebrate him. But for others, the suggestion that King, a Black minister who was vilified during his life and gunned down when he was just 39 years old, deserved a holiday was nothing short of incendiary. The first push for a holiday honouring King occurred just 4 days after his assassination. John Conyers, then a Democratic congressman from Michigan, took to the floor of Congress to insist on a federal holiday in King's honour. However, the request fell on deaf ears. One of the few Black people in Congress, Conyers had been an active member of the civil rights movement for years. He had visited Selma, Alabama, in support of King and the 1965 Freedom Day, one of several mass voter registration events in which large numbers of African Americans attempted to register to vote despite local defiance and armed intimidation. When his first bill failed, Conyers was undaunted. Conyers would persist year after year, Congress after Congress, in introducing the same bill again and again, gathering co-sponsors along the way until his persistence finally paid off, writes historian Don Wolfensberger. He enlisted the help of the Congressional Black Caucus, of which he was a founding member. For 15 years, the CBC attempted to break the stalled legislation loose, advocating within their constituent communities and helping Conyers introduce his bill year after year. Every single attempt failed, even after the bill was brought to the floor for debate. The tide finally turned in the early 1980s. By then, the CBC had collected 6 million signatures in support of a federal holiday in honour of King. Stevie Wonder had written a hit song, Happy Birthday, about King, which drove an upswell of public support for the holiday. And in 1983, as civil rights movement veterans gathered in Washington to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the March on Washington, King's seminal I Have a Dream speech and the 15th anniversary of his murder, something shook loose. When the legislation once again made it to the floor, it was filibustered by Jesse Helms, the Republican senator from North Carolina. As Helms pressed to introduce FBI smear material on King, whom the agency had spent years trying to pinpoint as a communist and a threat to the United States during the height of his influence into the congressional record, tensions boiled over. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the senator from New York, brought the materials onto the floor, then dropped them to the ground in disgust in a pivotal moment of the debate. The bill passed with ease the following day, 78 to 22, and President Ronald Reagan immediately signed the legislation. But though the first federal holiday was celebrated in 1986, it took years for observance to filter through to every state. Several southern states promptly combined Martin Luther King Jr. Day with holidays that uplifted Confederate leader Robert E. Lee, who was born on January 19th. Arizona initially observed the holiday, then rescinded it, leading to a years-long scuffle over whether to celebrate King that ended in multiple public referenda, major boycotts of the state, and a final voter registration push that helped propel a final referendum towards success in 1992. It wasn't until 2000 that every state in the Union finally observed Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Today, the holiday is still celebrated in conjunction with the celebration of Confederate figures in a few states. But after decades of contention and controversy, it is observed. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And you set up Stevie Wonder's song, and I'm not going to sing it. But for those of you who know it, what I'm going to ask you to do is to play it in your mind, listen to it in your mind, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the lyrics to you. I'm going to do my best Amanda Gorman interpretation. Happy Birthday is a song written, produced, and performed by Stevie Wonder for the Motown label. Wonder, a social activist, was one of the leading figures in the campaign to have the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. become a national holiday and created this single to publicize the cause. The song has since become a standard for use during birthdays, particularly among African Americans. You know, it doesn't make much sense. There ought to be a law against anyone who takes offense at a day in your celebration, because we all know in our minds that there ought to be a time that we can set aside to show just how much we love you. And I'm sure you would agree. What would fit more perfectly than to have a world party on the day you came to be? Happy birthday. I just never understood how a man who died for good could not have a day that would be set aside for his recognition, because it should never be, just because some cannot see the dream as clear as he, that they should make it become an illusion. And we all know everything that he stood for, time will bring, for in peace our hearts will sing, thanks to Martin Luther King. Happy birthday. Why has there never been a holiday where peace is celebrated all throughout the world? The time is overdue for people like me and you who know the way to truth is love and unity to all God's children. It should be a great event, and the whole day should be spent in full remembrance of those who lived and died for the oneness of all people. So let us all begin. We know that love can win. Let it out. Don't hold it in. Sing it loud as you can. Happy birthday. We know the key to unity of all people is in the dream that you had so long ago that lives in all of the hearts of people that believe in unity. We'll make the dream become a reality. I know we will, because our hearts tell us so. Happy birthday.
Good morning, everybody. I am honored to read The Good Samaritan by Andy Rao, former senior manager of content for Bible Gateway and currently serves at Calvin University. The day before Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, he delivered his last speech to a crowd of striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. The address is known as the I've Been to the Mountain speech. Like many of Dr. King's speeches and sermons, it illustrates his knack for taking famous Bible stories and brushing off the dust of overfamiliarity that has settled on them. In this speech, he looks to the well-known story of the Good Samaritan. Many of you may know the story of the Good Samaritan. It's one of Jesus's parables, and here it is. Jesus replied, quote, "A man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he also passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He took him, went to him, and bound him up on his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his animal, brought him to an inn, and cared for him. And the next day, he took out 2 shekels and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, quote, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." End quote. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, quote, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, quote, "You go and do likewise." It packs a moral punch, and quite a moral punch, especially that when you realize on Jesus's time, Samaritans and Jews generally despised and shunned one another. To get a sense of how this story must have come across to its original audience, replace the priest and Levite with devout Christians and the Samaritan with a member of any shunned or disliked group. Here's how King's "I've been to the mountaintop" speech recasts this parable, connecting it to modern attitudes. Why, King asks, didn't the priest and the Levite, devout religious men, stop to help the seriously injured man? Quote, "Now we use our imagination a great deal to determine why the priest and the ecclesiastical gatherings, and they had to get down to Jerusalem so they wouldn't be late for their meeting. At other times, we would speculate that there was a religious law that one who was engaged in religious ceremonies was not to touch a human body 24 hours before the ceremony. And now and then, we begin to wonder whether they were not going down to Jerusalem or down to Jericho instead, so as to organize a Jericho Road Improvement Association. That's a possibility. Maybe they felt it was better to deal with the problem from the causal root rather than to get bogged down with an individual effect. To quote Dr. King, "But I am going to tell you what my imagination tells me," said Dr. King. "It's possible that those men were afraid. You see, Jericho Road is a dangerous road." And he remembers, to quote Dr. King, "I remember when Mrs. King and I were first in Jerusalem. We rented a car and drove from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And as soon as we got on that road, I said to Mrs. King, I can see why Jesus used this as the setting for his parable. It's a winding, meandering road. It's conducive to ambushing. You start in Jerusalem, about 1,200 miles, or Jericho 15, and you're in Jericho 1,200 feet above sea level within 15 or 20 minutes when you started about 1,200 feet above sea level. And that's a dangerous road, he said. In the days of Jesus, it became known as the Bloody Pass. And you know, it's possible the priest and the Levite looked over to that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible that they felt that the man on the ground was merely faking and acting like he had been robbed and hurt to seize them over there, lure them for a quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, first question the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? And quote, Dr. King, but then the Good Samaritan came by and he reversed the question. That is, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to read the lyrics of A Change Gonna Come, written by Sam Cooke. It's kind of the unofficial theme of the Jim Crow Museum. It's been a favorite of Dr. Pilgrim, and so every time we go into the museum, think of this song, because this is kind of one of the things that inspired him. When Betty LaVette performed A Change Gonna Come in duet with John Bon Jovi at the first inaugural concert for President Obama, a new generation of listeners was introduced to a classic composition by one of the most influential writers and vocalists in pop history, Sam Cooke. Over the last half century since its first release, Change has grown into an anthem of the civil rights movement and an epitaph for the great performer, and an iconic piece of music. Few works have been as eloquent in their depiction of the triumph over tragedy. Several events occurred in 1963 that led Sam Cooke to finally write the protest song. One of the events was the killing of little girls in the bombing of the Black church in Birmingham, Alabama on September 15, 1963. And a side note to that, the mural that you see out in the hallway has the 4 little girls on that mural that was painted by John McDonald, Kendall Ferris faculty member. And I want to mention those girls' names because their names are important. So the 4 little girls, as known, their names are Denise McNair, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robertson. And there was actually a 5th girl with that group when the bomb went off, and that was a sister of Addie Mae Collins. And the sister, years ago, Ron Sneed narrated a video that we did for the Jim Crow Museum, and the sister had seen the video, and she reached out to the museum to express her gratitude for presenting her family in the situation. So kind of a little connection here with the Jim Crow Museum. But I digress. Another event was Cooke's experiencing racial discrimination. At a Holiday Inn in Shreveport, Louisiana, Cooke and his group were told that no rooms were available. He got furious and protested, trying to explain that he had reservations. That led to him being arrested and charged with creating a public disturbance. In June of 1963, Cooke lost his young child, Vincent, when he accidentally drowned in a family swimming pool. Cooke expressed his emotions and feelings through the song A Change Gonna Come. Cooke's obsession with Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind influenced him to record and complete the song, A Change Gonna Come. Cooke had also admired the message and delivery in Dylan's Blowing in the Wind. When he first heard it, he once commented he was almost ashamed that he had not written something like that himself. So here are the lyrics to the song, inspired by Cooke's pain and his desire to see a more just society. I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, because I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown, and somebody keeps telling me, don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down to my knees. Oh, there's been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Thank you.
Good morning. To serve by the Grateful Living Team. On February 4, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. gave what was to be his last sermon the drum major instinct. From the pulpit of Ebenezer Baptist Church. In that sermon, he said, "If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant." Amen. That new definition of greatness. For many of us, grateful living is synonymous with service, a key component of Dr. King's philosophy of the beloved community. When we recognize that the numerous gifts in and of our lives come to us unearned, entitlement falls away. It can be simple next step to see the difficulties experienced by others as equally undeserved, and to want to ensure that all people have access to safety, rights, comfort, and the privileges that we might enjoy. And an essential impact of grateful living is that it cultivates a sense of sufficiency and abundance, making us more available to life, to service, and to the courage and commitment that support taking a stand for meaningful change. Grateful living means many things to many people, but for me, it hinges on service and learning, writes Anthony Chavez, a former board member of a network for grateful living and the grandson of iconic civil rights and farm labor leader Cesar Chavez, in a blog post. Looking back, I don't recall explicitly talking much about living gratefully in my home, but it was modeled all around me. Early on, I learned that the highest human virtue is compassionately serving others. We were taught, as most others, that life is a gift, and we ought to be grateful for it. But for us, it wasn't about counting blessings as much as recognizing everyone's dignity. Don't get me wrong, counting your blessings is important, but it need not stop with oneself when we can divide each other's pain and multiply our joys. Anthony speaks to the value and importance of not simply noticing and appreciating our blessings, although that practice is transformative in itself, but also acting from a place of gratefulness of our lives. In doing so, we can participate in changing the lives of others and the world. In his sermon, The Drum Major Instinct, excerpted above, Dr. King speaks of our desire to be recognized and praised as a basic instinct. He invites us to consider what we wish to be commended for. As he approaches the end of the sermon, Dr. King declares, "If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring salvation to a world once wrought, if I can spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain. Yes, Jesus, I want to be your own, your right on your left side or your left side, not for any selfish reason. I want to be on your right or left side, not in terms of some political kingdom or ambition, but I just want to be there in love and justice and truth and commitment to others so that we can make of this world a new world."
I will rise with all my daughters. I will rise against my foes. I will rise with all the mothers. I will carry all their woes. brothers, oh, stand with me. Rise up hand in hand. Oh, stand with me. We will rise to spread love across this bitter land. I will rise.
Good morning. We're going to keep building on the sermon, The Drum Major Instinct. On February 4th, 1968, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his The Drum Major Instinct sermon at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. In this sermon, he acknowledges that many people, races, and nations desire recognition. They desire to be first. He calls this desire the drum major instinct. But he proposes an alternative kind of ambition one can achieve through a life of service. I just want to leave a committed life behind. Somewhat prophetically, Dr. King discusses in the conclusion what he would like to be said about him at his funeral. Selections of this sermon were then played 2 months later after his assassination at his funeral. Today, I will share the concluding words of that powerful sermon. Every now and then, I guess, we all think realistically about that day when we will be victimized with what is life's final common denominator. That's something that we call death. We all think about it. And every now and then, I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral. And I don't think of it in a morbid sense. And every now and then, I ask myself, what is it that I would want said? And I leave the word to you this morning. If any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I do not want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. And every now and then, I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That is not important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards, and that's not important either. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I would like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war questions. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that. I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And of all the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. but I just want to leave a committed life behind. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Inspired by this year's theme of helping others rise, and upon reflection on all humanity has recently been through and is going through, the pandemic, the Russian war in Ukraine, hate crimes against racial and ethnic minorities, women, the LGBTQ+ community, widespread violence, including school and other mass public shootings, the effects of global warming. I want to offer this poem about how nearly all begins small, with generosity between only two, but that generosity, love, and hope has the capacity to concentrically lift humanity and elicit change. In this spirit, I'm going to read a hopeful short prose poem that was published in Eunoia Review and will be included in my forthcoming poetry collection, Phantom Limbs. It is titled A Birthday Poem for Us, a birthday poem for us. And I think it's interesting that we opened with Dr. Pink's comments about love extremism. One of my phrases is, we love forward. The best way to go forward is to love forward. And also that we're back to a birthday, but this one is for us. So starting small and going concentrically outward to humanity. A birthday poem for us. My husband asks me to write for him a poem for his birthday and tell all that is true in just one sentence for him alone, but I am writing also to you because he and I knew each other before, we knew each other before, just like you and I knew each other before all we ever knew and will ever know. And now in words alone, letters even more alone, these solitary letters creating words, creating communication through bravas and bravos, reverberating across miles into minds and over mountains, heat waves above pavement, on a blistering day in a surprise city as he rubs my forehead with his thick thumb, back and forth, strumming the tension that is not only mine, but ours, yours too, making the music, the lovely music that brings our breath so close that heat is all and brings you, reader, to me, to all of us, to we, as we thrum at once. No end punctuation, no single heartbeats, all the world a single sentence. One sonic boom, one giant scroll, unraveling one birthday, one deep breath, sigh for us all with no full stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the choir for coming out. I thought that was a good idea to have the choir come. Of course, now the problem is you got to come next year and the year after that and the year after that. So I am very glad to be here. Of course, I'm actually glad to be anywhere. People say you can't bargain with God. Well, maybe they can't. So the good news is I'm still here. The bad news is I got to be nice to people from now on and make some amends. So glad to be here today. Glad everybody is reflecting on Dr. King's words and everything. So I want to read something to you. Forgive my voice if you would. You have undoubtedly heard me tell how Mrs. Lula Bell McNeil Ellis helped me rise. But I want to tell you more about her. She was born 1936 in Pine Hill, Alabama, a couple of hours north of Mobile. As a child, her family moved to Mobile, where she remained for the rest of her life. She married Harold Clifton Ellis and they had 7 children. She was a school teacher who touched the lives of almost every family in Plateau, Alabama. Have you heard of Plateau, Alabama? It is a historic community located 3 miles north of downtown Mobile. It is sometimes called Africa Town because it was founded by the descendants of kidnapped Africans illegally brought to Mobile aboard the Clotilda, a ship owned by shipbuilder Timothy Mayer. He wagered another wealthy white man that he could bring a cargo of kidnapped Africans aboard a ship into Mobile, despite the 1807 Act prohibiting the importation of slaves. In the autumn of 1860, Captain William Foster, working for Mayer, departed for West Africa and smuggled 110 enslaved Africans from Dahomey into Mobile, with 1 person perishing during the Middle Passage. The slavers burned the ship in Mobile Bay. On May 22nd, 2019, the Alabama Historic Commission and partners announced that the wreck had been located. This story is told in the Netflix documentary called Descendant. Africa Town, or Plateau, was home to some of the last survivors of the transatlantic slave trade in the United States. I believe that Harold Ellis's family were descendants of the enslaved Africans on the Clotilda. When he married Lula Bell McNeil, they built a life in the community where the kidnapped Africans had lived. So it was unsurprising that the oldest child, Jacqueline Arlinda Ellis, received the African Town Leadership Award. She was passionate about having Plateau declared a historic community, believing it would bring much needed economic resources to the poverty-stricken community. Jackie went to Charles Frederick Viger High School. I attended Mattie T. Blunt High School. Our schools were rivals. We were friends. We attended Jarvis Christian College together. When she graduated, she moved to Washington, D.C. to join the staff of Senator Howard Heflin. She attended Georgetown University Law School, receiving her Juris Doctorate. Following her service on Senator Heflin's staff, she became Chief of Staff to the Honorable Major R. Owens of the 11th Congressional District of Brooklyn, New York, where she served for more than 17 years. Had it not been for Jackie's mother, Mrs. Lula Bell McNeil Ellis, I might not have attended Jarvis Christian College. I was visiting Jackie in their home. Mrs. Ellis asked me if I was excited about the next step in my life. I said yes, but without much enthusiasm. She sensed that something was wrong and gently prodded me. I explained that I had enough scholarship money, but I needed money for a bus ticket to get to college. She left the room, returned, and handed me $75. That is almost $400 in today's money. I was embarrassed, but thankful. Her gift made my education possible. I don't know what would have happened without her generous gift, but I know what happened with it. I went to Jarvis and then The Ohio State. I became a professor. I founded a museum. I wrote some books. I traveled the nation giving talks. I met some people. Poor people also have hopes and dreams. Do not look down on someone because they are poor. Please do not assume you are more intelligent than someone because they have less money than you. Please do not presume that you are more moral than someone because they are poorer than you. Please do not assume you are better than someone because you have the money to help them. I am thankful that Mrs. Ellis was in my life, had extra money, saw money as a tool to help one of God's children, and that I was that child. We help others with our time, talents, and treasure. And by treasure, I mean money. In the many years since her generous gift, I have repaid the kindness to others. I am not bragging or complaining when I say that I have given money to people that needed it. I did it without attention or the expectation that it would be repaid. Please consider giving money to someone who needs it. My reflection about Mrs. Ellis and her family has a sad ending. Plateau is a disproportionately Black and poor community. For decades, industry expanded along its waterfront periphery, surrounding the central residential neighborhood. Industrial manufacturers and chemical refineries heavily polluted the local environment by the mid-20th century. A class action lawsuit filed in 2018 on behalf of about 1,200 Africantown residents claims that the former International Paper Mill had for years spewed ash and released hazardous chemicals in volumes that exceeded EPA limits, leading to poor health outcomes such as high cancer rates. Most Plateau families have lost members to cancer. Miss Ellis, Jackie, and several other members of their family died from cancer. When I engage in activism, I also repay the debt that I owe to Mrs. Ellis. Thank you.
Welcome to our 29th annual Martin Luther King Jr. In Service and Launch, Helping Others Rise. My name is Karen Royster James. I'm the director of the Academic Support Center and Structured Learning Assistance at Ferris State University. How many of us have had a delicious bowl of gumbo? I know, I hear you. What is gumbo? Gumbo is a hearty stew made from combinations of seafood, meat, or vegetables that are served over hot cooked rice. It's a bowl of goodness and deliciousness. I heard that Dr. Pilgrim enjoys a good bowl of gumbo, as well as preparing it. Today, I'm going to share with you some ingredients that I use in my gumbo. My main ingredient is love. The gumbo that I am preparing is one made with love to inspire and motivate others to rise to their highest potential. Say potential. Enjoy the rest of my gumbo. My ingredients and seasonings are a blend from Dr. Joshua F.J. Ironwood, Professor, Department of Geography, and a research associate at the Rock Ethics Institute at Penn State University. He wrote MLK Vision of Love as a Moral Imperative Still Matters. President Pink's message to students.
I want to make sure that you know that we are here for you. Tutoring, advising, all those things. We are here for you because you're going to get this thing done. So go Bulldogs.
Former First Lady Michelle Obama's new book, The Light We Carry.
The Light We Carry is about recognizing the flame that burns inside each and every one of us, and understanding that each of us can kindle that spark for ourselves through even the toughest times. It's about understanding the power of our own stories. I talk about this all the time, but I'm gonna dig in more in this book. I talk about maintaining calmness and perspective in the face of fear and anxiety. I also talk about how important it is to help others to see their own light as well. Throughout my life, I've developed what I'm calling a set of tools that help me get through. I think we all have these tools. I'm just sharing what I use because so much of what we need is already within us. That's what I've come to learn. I think together we can create something powerful and help us refocus our energies on something more positive. This book offers a great beginning to a broader conversation.
And finally, Bishop T.D. Jakes, dream big.
Don't you give up on your dream. I don't care if you don't have the money, and you don't have the help, and you don't have the family for it, and you don't have the background for it, and you don't have the friends for it. Don't you give up on your dream. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. Don't you do it.
The Ideas of Love from Dr. Ironwood. Dr. King focused on the role of love as the key to building healthy communities and the ways in which love can and should be at the center of social interactions. Dr. King said, in speaking of love, we are not referring to some sentimental emotion. It would be nonsense to urge men to love their oppressors in an affectionate sense. When we speak of loving those who oppose us, we speak of a love which is expressed in the Greek word agape. Agape means nothing sentimental or basically affectionate. It means understanding, redeeming goodwill for all men, an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return.
Let's go.
For me. Whoa. Can you just smile for me?
Whatever you're in right now.
Smile for me.
Smile.
Can you just smile for me?
And my people say.
We shall overcome
Let's give them another round of applause, please. So every year we give MLK Social Justice Awards to acknowledge people that have done great things. And so we have 2 awards we want to give today. And our first award is, oh, and by the way, the criteria for the award is you can't want it. You can't politic for it. You can't do the stuff we normally do when in higher education. So you just have to do the work, right? You just have to be someone who's trying to make someone's life better. And so this first person, I want to thank them for the work they've done on the campus climate team and trying to help us diversify our faculty and walk in the walk. So if I could get Frederica Hayes to come forward, that would be awesome. I don't know if you want to read that. What is that green? What is that? Okay. Did you want to say a word?
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to work here at Ferris and be part of a team that believes in diversity and social justice and rights. And I thank everyone who is here with me because you don't do it alone. You do it as a group. Thank you.
And it's rare that we honor a person who's not a Ferris employee. It's not unheard of. We've done it, I think, three times, and we want to do it again. And this award we want to give to Sharon A. Banks for the, and I'll hand it to you so in case you want to read it. But she is playing an outstanding role as we try to build a new museum. And we want to say thank you as a university to her. So please come forward. I'll take one later.
Thank you. It's my honor to be with you. Dr. Pilgrim, you're exactly right. Didn't expect it, didn't know I was getting it until I got a call and to show up and be a part of this. And I couldn't be more honored than to be here with you. Dr. Pink, Mrs. Pink, my pleasure to see you again as well. I'll just say a few things. First of all, my granddaughter got me here this morning, right? So Jordan Banks, thank you. Love you much. I told her it was going to take about 2.5, close to maybe 3 hours to get here. We were here in 2 hours. So we had lots of time to spare. So thank you, my dear. To my dear friend of more than 40 years, Vice Chair, Board, Ferris State University, Ron Sneed. He's been a friend for all those years, a very dear friend, and introduced me to the university and introduced me to Dr. Pink and Dr. Pilgrim and reeled me right in to assist in any way I possibly could. I really didn't know what that meant, but I know, I'm sorry. I know I got busy doing some things and being involved with working with Sarah and Franklin and Elise. Thank you all for your assistance, because when I didn't know what I was doing, I called you and said, okay, what am I doing? And we got some people involved, and I'm looking forward to having more people involved and being a part of this illustrious opportunity and much needed opportunity to share the Jim Crow Museum locally, nationally, globally. It is befitting. And the last thing I will say in terms of this day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when I was a young girl, very, very young girl, my mother took me on the walk. I'm from Detroit. So we walked down Woodward Avenue when he came to do the precursor to the I Have a Dream speech in Detroit, Michigan, and also visited New Bethel Church with the Reverend C.L. Franklin. And so it's near and dear to my heart to receive this award, this recognition from Ferris State University, and to be a part of your team to do all that I can to provide support and service. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Before I turn it back over to our president, and by the way, it's good to wake up at a school where Bill Pink is president. Oh, you didn't hear me what I said. I said it's good to wake up at a university where Bill Pink is president. And I mean, he took his time getting here, but you got here before I left, so that was good. I appreciate that. So a couple quick thank you. Again, I'm not gonna keep saying thank you. How many times I gotta say thank you to you guys? I mean, it's just been a beautiful thing. It's just wonderful. Also want to thank Elise Gramza, who helped put this together. And Elise is amazing, just absolutely amazing. So I didn't really know Elise well. And now I feel like she's the most important person here helping doing the work that we're doing. So thank you, Elise, for doing that. And then Sarah, I don't want to embarrass you, but I'm gonna miss you. So Sarah's going on, and you know, your first responsibility is to you and your family. And so you got to do what's good for them. But you don't tell me not to miss you. You know, I don't know where you're getting off with that, you know. So we're gonna miss you. You did good work here. And we wish you well. And so we're still here. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you to all the readers. Thank you to the people who came. And the big part of today really is what happens after this. Although there were some very deep things that should have us all thinking about stuff. But the real big thing is what happens right after this when we sit in fellowship together and eat together. So I'm really hoping that all of you can stick around and we can eat together. So thank you very much. And I'm gonna turn it back over to President Pete.
Well, friends, it's been a great morning, and there's no way that I get out of this and feel good about myself without acknowledging the incredible work for decades that Dr. David Pilgrim has given to this university. When I was looking at and first made it to Ferris State 6 months ago, one of the people that was repeatedly mentioned to me by name was Dr. Pilgrim. Well, you know, you go in there, you know Dr. Pilgrim is there. And that's, I mean, it's a reoccurring theme when you talk about Ferris State to folks who have known of Dr. Pilgrim's work. And so when words about you precede you, that's a compliment, as long as those are good words, right? Dr. Pilgrim, those are great words that people in this community and across the country know about you and your work and your dedication, not only to this university, but your dedication to justice and your dedication to what's right. And so we are blessed as a university to have you as part of this university. So thank you for what you do for this university. I am hopeful that you will all stick around for lunch. I will, that's going to be next door. I'm going to leave you with this. It has been mentioned several times about the I Have a Dream speech that Dr. King made. the thing I leave you with this morning that I want you to keep in mind, there's one thing that he said in that I Have a Dream speech very early in the speech, because as a setting for this, this was the March on Washington. Thousands and thousands marched to Washington in the name of what is right, truth, justice. Thousands of people on the plaza there in DC. And as Dr. King stood and as he spoke to that crowd on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, one of the first things he said that day, and I'll paraphrase this, after all that we have done today and after everything, this statement we have made to this country, it would be a shame for us tomorrow to go back to business as usual. Incredible words. Because what that means are on days like today, where we have heard all these beautiful readings, where we have thought about things that truly, truly can make our world a better place. Shame on us if we just go back to our desk, our lives, our classes as business as usual. His challenge was, what do you do to make a difference now? Now that you know what you know, and now that you've done what you've done, what do you do now to make a difference in the world? What do you do to make a difference in the world? I hear this term woke, being woke and all these things. I will tell you two things that I have seen in our country that I believe are what I would call wake-up calls to us. Aside from what we saw a couple of years ago with George Floyd, that was something of a wake-up call for many people. But just a couple of weeks ago, when many people sat in their homes on a Monday night to watch a football game and to see a young man collapse on the field and truly come near death, and at some point in the time on that field was likely gone. To see a whole country say, what about DeMar? Is he okay? Should we pray for him? Yes, let's pray for him. Let's take a $2,500 goal that he had to raise money for Christmas toys for kids. His goal was $2,500. $7 million later, when a country said, that's worth my time, that's worth my treasures. But when a whole country said, it matters that we look out for each other, that is a wake-up call to us. Always take wake-up calls and take them for what all they do to your heart and what they can do for others. And never forget, never forget. Looking forward to breaking bread with you. I gotta tell you, that gumbo got me very hungry. You guys have a good day today. Go Dogs.